The clinking of silverware was a symphony of wealth, a soundscape Marcus Wellington relished. From his corner booth at Celesta, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, he was king. Across from him, his sycophantic junior partner Devon hung on his every word. They were closing a deal that would make them titans. Their waitress, a quiet woman with weary eyes, approached their table. To her, they were just another order. To Marcus, she was nothing a prop in his grand play. And so he leaned in, switching to his native French, and began to speak, confident. His cruel words were a secret language, a private joke. He was about to learn that some secrets don't stay buried, and some props can bring the whole stage crashing down. The ache in Amara's feet was a dull, constant drumbeat, a rhythm she had come to know intimately over the past 19 months. It was a stark contrast to the confident stride she once employed on the polished floors of Banque Commerciale Internationale in Paris. Now her world was the plush crimson carpet of Celesta, a Michelin-starred restaurant in the heart of Manhattan, where her sensible black shoes absorbed spilled wine and the silent judgment of the city's elite. Each night was a performance. She wasn't just Amara, the 31-year-old woman whose life had been systematically dismantled. She was the waitress, an efficient, smiling automaton. She mastered the art of being present but invisible, of anticipating a need before it was spoken, of carrying plates laden with seared scallops and truffle foam as if they were the most important objects in the world. To her patrons, they were. To her, they were just heavy. Tonight, the air in Celesta was particularly thick with the scent of money and ambition. A wave of Wall Street patrons had descended, celebrating victories Amara could no longer comprehend. She moved between them, a ghost in a black uniform, refilling water glasses, clearing plates, and offering a practiced gentle smile that never reached her tired dark eyes. Her manager, Rosa, a stout woman with a no-nonsense demeanor and a surprisingly kind heart, gave her a sympathetic glance from across the room. "You got table 7, Amara the big man himself." "Wellington," she had whispered earlier, a hint of warning in her tone. "Try to stay off his radar." Amara knew the name. Who in New York didn't? Marcus Wellington was the founder and CEO of Wellington Equity, a private equity firm known for its ruthless, almost surgical takeovers. His face was a regular feature in financial magazines, always with the same predatory smile and eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they landed on. He was a shark, and Celesta was one of his favorite feeding grounds. When she approached table 7, the energy was palpable. Marcus Wellington was exactly as he appeared in print, impeccably dressed in a custom suit that probably cost more than her apartment security deposit, with silver-streaked hair swept back from his forehead. He exuded an aura of absolute, unshakable self-importance. With him were 2 other men. One was young, with a desperate-to-please look on his face. This was Devon, his junior partner. The other was an older, impeccably dressed Japanese gentleman, Mr. Nakamura, whose calm, observant demeanor suggested he was the prize they were trying to win. "A bottle of the Chateau Margaux, 09, Marcus announced without looking at her, his voice a low baritone that expected immediate obedience. He didn't use the name of the wine. He used its legend, a subtle test of the staff's knowledge. "An excellent choice, sir," Amara replied, her voice even and professional. She didn't offer a fawning comment or a story about the vineyard. She simply acknowledged the order and retreated. This was the key to survival. Be efficient, be respectful, and be forgettable. She returned with the wine, performing the familiar ritual of presentation and pouring with practiced grace. Marcus ignored her entirely, deep in conversation with Mr. Nakamura about market volatility. Devon, however, watched her every move as if to ensure she didn't spill a single drop of the liquid gold onto the pristine white tablecloth. "The key to our strategy, Nakamura-san," Marcus was saying, his English laced with the arrogance of a man who has never been told no, "is identifying undervalued assets with bloated, inefficient management. We don't just invest, we cleanse." We strip away the sentimentality and expose the raw, profitable core. Mr. Nakamura nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. A philosophy of disruption, Wellington San. Precisely. Disruption is another word for progress, Marcus declared, taking a sip of the wine. He swirled it, inhaled its bouquet, and gave a curt nod of approval. Not to Amara, but to the wine itself, as if it had presented itself for his judgment. Amara finished the pour and was about to step away when Devon cleared his throat, and a round of sparkling water. San Pellegrino. She nodded and turned. As she walked toward the service station, a faint, nagging familiarity tickled the back of her mind. It wasn't just Marcus's public persona. It was something about the rhythm of his speech, the specific cadence of his arrogance. It reminded her of the men who had destroyed her career, the ones who had sat in boardrooms in Paris, speaking in confident, clipped tones about cleansing and efficiency before they carved up companies and lives, leaving ruin in their wake. She shook the feeling away. It was a ghost, nothing more. Every powerful man sounded the same. Her past was in a locked box, and she had no intention of opening it. Her only concern was making it through the next 3 hours, collecting her tips, and returning to her tiny, anonymous apartment in Queens. The meal progressed, a carefully choreographed ballet of service and consumption. Amara moved with quiet efficiency, clearing the appetizer plates of tuna tartare and replacing them with the main courses. A perfectly seared filet mignon for Marcus, pan-seared halibut for Devon, and a delicate miso-glazed black cod for Mr. Nakamura. Throughout it all, Marcus held court, his voice the dominant instrument in the table's small orchestra. He was trying to impress Mr. Nakamura, that much was clear. The deal they were discussing was significant, a potential joint venture to acquire a French manufacturing company. As they ate, Marcus, perhaps feeling the need to establish a more intimate, exclusive rapport, or simply to show off, switched to French. He likely assumed it was a safe channel, a private code in the bustling English-speaking metropolis of New York. A waitress in a place like this might be a struggling actress from Ohio or a student from California. The probability of her understanding the nuanced, business-centric French of a Parisian boardroom was in his mind 0. He leaned forward, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. "Allure, Nakamura-san," he began, his tone shifting, becoming sharper, more direct. "The board of Rousseau Industries is weak. A bunch of old men clinging to the past." Amara was standing near a service station a few feet away, polishing cutlery. The language hit her not like a whisper, but like a physical blow. It was the French of her former life, Parisian French, spoken with the accent of the financial district. Her hands froze for a fraction of a second over a silver fork before she forced them to continue their methodical polishing. "Don't react, you're invisible." Devon, ever the sycophant, chimed in with his own French, less polished, more eager. "Absolument. We have internal projections that show we can cut their operating costs by 40%. Project Titan will be a masterpiece. Rousseau Industries." Project Titan. The names echoed in the silent, ruined chambers of Amara's memory. Rousseau Industries was a mid-sized, family-owned engineering firm from Lyon, known for its quality and its deep commitment to its employees. 3 years ago, back in Paris, she had been the lead analyst on a defensive strategy for them, helping them fight off a hostile takeover attempt. The aggressor was a shadowy shell corporation, its true backers hidden. The plan she had drafted would have saved them. But then the data she had based her entire strategy on was leaked. Not just leaked, it was subtly altered, making her look incompetent, even criminally negligent. The deal collapsed. Her reputation was shattered. And the firm she worked for, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, threw her to the wolves. And the code name for that hostile takeover plan, the one she only discovered after it was too late? Project Titan. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. It couldn't be a coincidence. The world was large, but the world of high-stakes international finance was a small, incestuous village. She felt a cold dread mix with a white-hot rage. These men weren't just arrogant patrons. They were vultures picking at a carcass she had tried to save. They were connected to the moment her life broke in two. She had to stay calm. She needed to hear more. She moved from the service station, her steps measured, and approached their table under the pretense of refilling their water glasses. She kept her eyes downcast, focusing on the flow of water into crystal, her face a neutral mask. Marcus, now fully warmed up, gestured dismissively with his fork toward the general direction of the restaurant staff. "Il faut simplement les ignorer," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. "You just have to ignore these people. They're just part of the decoration." He then looked directly at Amara, though his eyes seemed to pass right through her. He lowered his voice slightly, speaking to Devon. "Regardla. Probably some immigrant trying to send money back home. A pretty, empty face good enough to serve the rabble, but not a single thought behind it." Devon chuckled nervously. "El fait si quand lui dit." That's all that matters. The insult was so casual, so profoundly dehumanizing, it almost took her breath away. It wasn't the worst thing she had ever heard, but coming from this man, in this context, layered on top of the revelation about Rousseau Industries, it was like a match thrown on gasoline. The weary ache in her feet was gone, replaced by a surge of adrenaline. The ghost of Paris was no longer a faint memory. It was sitting at table 7, eating filet mignon and mocking her in the language of her birth. Mr. Nakamura had remained silent during this exchange. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his water, and for a fleeting moment, his eyes met Amara's. There was no pity in his gaze, but there was a flicker of something else. Curiosity, perhaps even discomfort. He was a witness. Marcus, oblivious, continued. "Le point crucial, c'est qu'il faut agir vite. As soon as we have control, we will outsource the research and development department they value so much. Too expensive, too sentimental. Their most valuable patents are all we want." It was the exact strategy the Shell Corporation had planned 3 years ago. The exact strategy she had warned Rousseau against. Wellington wasn't just connected to her downfall. He was its architect. He had hidden behind layers of corporate secrecy. And now, years later, thousands of miles away, he was laying his sins bare on her table, assuming she was too stupid to understand. Amara finished pouring the water, her hand miraculously steady. She placed the pitcher back on her tray, her mind racing. The humiliation, the years of struggle, the injustice of it all coalesced into a single sharp point of clarity. She wasn't just a waitress. She was Amara Diallo, and she remembered everything. The rest of the main course was a blur for Amara. She moved on autopilot, her mind a whirlwind of French phrases, corporate logos, and the ghost of her former self. The rage that had flared within her was now banked, simmering beneath a layer of icy calm. An opportunity had just fallen into her lap, a dangerous, terrifying, and utterly irresistible opportunity. She wasn't thinking about revenge. Not yet. She was thinking about justice. She served them dessert, a decadent chocolate lava cake for Marcus and Devon, a light yuzu sorbet for Mr. Nakamura. All the while, the French conversation continued, filled with financial jargon and self-congratulatory laughter. Marcus was boasting now, talking about a previous acquisition, a tech firm in Marseille, and how they had trimmed the fat. A euphemism she knew meant laying off hundreds of employees right before the holidays. Finally, the meal was over. The plates were cleared. The last of the wine was gone. Marcus Wellington leaned back in his chair, patting his stomach with the satisfaction of a Roman emperor. He caught Amara's eye and snapped his fingers, a gesture of pure, unadulterated entitlement. "The check," he commanded in English. Then, as she turned to retrieve it, he made his final dismissive remark in French, a parting shot for the benefit of his companions. "Depatch-toi, ma fille. We have more important things to do than wait for you to drag your little immigrant feet over here." Amara stopped. Her back was to them. The entire restaurant seemed to fade away. The clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversation, The distant city sirens, it all dissolved into a low hum. There was only table 7 and the echo of his words. Depactoi, mafia. Hurry up, girl. She took a slow, deliberate breath. She could walk away. She could bring him the check, accept his likely paltry tip, and disappear back into her anonymous life. It was the safe choice. It was the smart choice. But 19 months of biting her tongue, of swallowing her pride, of accepting her unjust fate, it was all over. She turned around. She walked back to the table, not with the hurried shuffle of a servant, but with the steady, confident gait she used to employ walking into a boardroom. She held no bill folder. Her hands were empty, clasped loosely in front of her. She looked directly at Marcus Wellington, holding his gaze until he was forced to acknowledge her presence as more than a piece of furniture. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. Amara smiled, but it was not her waitress smile. This one was sharp, precise, and utterly devoid of warmth. And then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, yet it cut through the air with stunning clarity. Her French was flawless, not the casual French Marcus had been using, but the formal, academic French of a Sorbonne-educated professional. "Excusez-moi, monsieur," she began, her tone perfectly level. "Your bill will be right out, but I must point something out to you." The effect was instantaneous and seismic. Marcus Wellington's smug expression didn't just fall, it shattered. His jaw went slack. His eyes widened in disbelief. He looked as if a statue had just started speaking to him. Devon froze with a piece of chocolate on his fork, his face paling to a sickly white. He looked from Amara to Marcus and back again, pure panic in his eyes. The only person who didn't look utterly shocked was Mr. Nakamura. He simply placed his napkin on the table, leaned forward slightly, and watched Amara with an expression of intense, undivided interest. Amara continued, her gaze locked on Marcus. "Votre grammar manque un peu de respect. Your grammar is a bit sloppy when addressing a lady, even if she is just a waitress. Madame or mademoiselle would perhaps be more appropriate than mafia. It lacks respect." She let the correction hang in the air, a small, precise incision. It was more than a comment on his language. It was a challenge to his perceived superiority. Marcus finally found his voice, sputtering in a clumsy mix of French and English. "Qu'est-ce que ... What do you think you're doing?" Amara's smile tightened. "Elle fait ce qu'on lui dit," she said, echoing Devon's earlier sycophantic remark. "I'm just doing what I'm told. That's all that matters, right? But sometimes one overhears things. For example, that the board of Rousseau Industries is weak, or that Project Titan aims to dismantle their research and development department to get to their patents." Every word was a hammer blow. Devon dropped his fork. It landed on his plate with a loud clatter that seemed to echo through the now silent space around their table. Marcus's face, already pale, was now ashen. The blood had drained from it completely. He was looking at her now, truly seeing her for the first time, and a horrifying dawning of recognition mixed with raw fear was blooming in his eyes. He didn't know who she was yet, but he knew she was not a waitress. She was a threat. The bubble of silence around table 7 was thick with tension. Marcus Wellington stared at Amara, his mind clearly racing, trying to place her, to categorize her, to understand the monumental miscalculation he had just made. He was a man who controlled every variable. Yet a random variable had just stood up and recited the core tenets of his most secret predatory plan. He tried to regain control, falling back on blustering authority. "C'est absurde," he snarled in French, his voice a low growl. "That's absurd. You have no idea what you're talking about. You've been eavesdropping on private conversations." "That's grounds for immediate dismissal." Amara didn't flinch. The fear she had lived with for nearly 2 years was being burned away by the righteous fire of the moment. "Oh, I believe I know exactly what I'm talking about, Monsieur Wellington," she replied, her voice still dangerously calm. "Project Titan isn't a new plan. It's an old plan, repackaged from 3 years ago. Back then, It was pushed by a shell company called Meridian Holdings to disguise the true investors. Investors like, for example, Wellington Equity. At the mention of Meridian Holdings, Devon made a small choking sound. It was an old entity, buried deep in their corporate history, a tool used for their most aggressive and legally ambiguous operations. For the waitress to know that name was impossible. Marcus's eyes narrowed. The bluster was gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian focus. "Who are you?" he demanded, switching back to English, as if the language itself could offer him a shield. This was the moment, the culmination of everything. Amara stood a little taller, and for the first time that night, she let the mask of the weary waitress fall away completely. In its place was the face of the sharp, brilliant financial analyst she had once been. "My name," she said, speaking slowly and deliberately, her French crisp and clear for all three men to understand, "is Amara Diallo." She let her name hang in the air. To Devon and Mr. Nakamura, it meant nothing. But she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Marcus Wellington. She saw the flicker of confusion in his eyes. Then the frantic search through his mental archives of enemies and obstacles. And then she saw the moment he found it. The moment the puzzle pieces clicked into place. His face went from ashen to the color of bleached bone. It was a look of pure, unadulterated horror. He remembered. "Je m'appelle Amara Diallo," Amara continued, pressing her advantage, her voice resonating with the weight of her history. "I was the lead analyst at Banque Commerciale Internationale in Paris. I was the one who wrote the defensive strategy for Rousseau Industries against your first attack. The strategy that would have worked if my data hadn't been stolen and manipulated to discredit me and destroy my career. You didn't just get me fired, you erased me. And you thought I had disappeared forever." She took a step closer to the table, leaning in slightly, her voice dropping to an intense whisper. "You hid behind your lawyers and shell companies, but I always suspected it was your work. I just never had the proof until tonight. You just served it to me on a silver platter, along with your insults." Marcus Wellington, the titan of industry, the king of Celesta, was speechless. He looked like he had seen a ghost, and in a way, he had. The ghost of a life he had ruined had just served him his dessert. He had mocked a waitress, and in doing so, had confessed his corporate sins to the one person on earth who understood their full significance. Devon looked like he was about to be physically ill. He was a junior partner. He was implicated, but he wasn't the architect. He was just a passenger on a ship that was now suddenly taking on water at an alarming rate. Then a new voice entered the conversation. Mr. Nakamura, who had been watching the entire exchange with the quiet intensity of a chess master, folded his hands on the table. He looked at Amara, and for the first time, spoke to her directly, his English formal and precise. "Miss Diallo," he said, his voice calm but carrying immense authority. "Your name is familiar to me as well. My own company, Nakamura Heavy Industries, was approached by Meridian Holdings 2 years ago with a similar disruptive proposal for one of our competitors. We declined. We found their methods to be dishonorable." He turned his cool gaze upon Marcus. "Wellington-san, I believe our dinner is concluded, and so is our potential partnership. We will not be moving forward with Project Titan or any other venture with your firm." With that, he stood up, gave a slight, respectful bow to Amara, not to Marcus, and walked away from the table without a backward glance, leaving a stunned silence and the wreckage of Marcus Wellington's evening, his deal, and quite possibly his career. The departure of Mr. Nakamura was like a gavel striking, ending the proceedings. The spell was broken. Marcus Wellington, who had been frozen in a state of horrified paralysis, finally lurched into motion. His face was a thunderous mask of fury and humiliation. "You," he hissed at Amara, his voice trembling with rage. "You're finished. I'll have you blacklisted from every restaurant, every coffee shop in this city. You'll be scrubbing floors for the rest of your pathetic immigrant life. Do you hear me?" His voice was rising, attracting the attention of nearby tables. Patrons were starting to turn and stare, sensing the drama unfolding. Rosa, the manager, who had been watching from a distance with a worried frown, began to stride purposefully toward them. Amara stood her ground. The threats that would have terrified her yesterday now seemed hollow. "You already did your worst to me, Monsieur Wellington," she said, her voice steady. "You took my career, my reputation, my home. You think threatening my waitressing job scares me now? You just confessed to corporate espionage and market manipulation in front of a witness. I think you have bigger problems." Just then, Rosa arrived at the table. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Wellington?" she asked, her tone firm but professional. This employee of yours," Marcus sputtered, pointing a shaking finger at Amara. "She's insane. She's been harassing us, making wild accusations. I want her fired. Now." Rosa looked from Marcus's apoplectic face to Amara's unnervingly calm one. She had worked in this business for 30 years. She knew the difference between a hysterical employee and a cornered millionaire. "Amara," she said gently, "why don't you go take your break?" "I'll handle this." "She's not taking a break. She's fired." Marcus roared. "Actually," Amara said, unpinning the small magnetic name tag from her uniform. She placed it gently on the table next to the half-eaten lava cake. "I quit." She looked at Rosa with a small, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, Rosa, for the scene." Rosa just shook her head slightly, a glimmer of understanding and perhaps even pride in her eyes. "Go on, honey." "It's all right." As Amara turned to walk away, a hand gently touched her arm. She turned. It was Mr. Nakamura. He had waited for her near the restaurant's exit. In his hand, he held out a sleek black business card. "Miss Diallo," he said, his voice low, "what Mr. Wellington did to you was an injustice. What he planned to do to Rousseau is a disease in our industry. My flight back to Tokyo is not until Friday. I would be very interested to hear your full story. Perhaps we have mutual interests." Amara looked down at the card. Kenji Nakamura, CEO, Nakamura Heavy Industries. It felt impossibly heavy in her hand, a lifeline thrown from the most unexpected of quarters. "Thank you, Mr. Nakamura," she said, her voice thick with emotion. I will call you." He gave another short, respectful bow and was gone. Amara walked through the restaurant's kitchen, past the stunned faces of her now former colleagues. She didn't stop at her locker. She walked straight out the back service door and into the cool night air of the alleyway. She leaned against the rough brick wall, the adrenaline finally beginning to subside, leaving her trembling. She had done it. She had stood up to the man who ruined her and had, in one spectacular fashion, blown up her quiet, miserable life. She was unemployed. She had no plan. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt free. The ghost of Paris was no longer haunting her. She had given it a voice. Back inside Celesta, Marcus Wellington was left to stew in the ruins. His deal was dead. His reputation in front of a major international player was shattered. And a ghost from his past now had a name, a face, and a powerful new potential ally. As he threw his credit card on the table to pay the exorbitant bill, his mind was not on the money. It was on one thing, silencing Amara Diallo for good this time. The first domino had fallen, and it had landed squarely on him. The war was just beginning. The 24 hours after Amara walked out of Celesta were a surreal blend of terror and exhilaration. The initial rush of righteous victory gave way to the stark reality of her situation. She was jobless, with dwindling savings and a powerful enemy who now knew exactly where to find her. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart leaped into her throat, expecting a threatening message or a call from a lawyer representing Wellington Equity. She spent the first night sleepless in her small Queens apartment, the business card of Kenji Nakamura sitting on her nightstand like a talisman. Could she trust him? His gesture seemed genuine, but in her world, altruism was a rare and often deceptive commodity. He was a corporate titan, just like Wellington. Sharks rarely defended the fish. They just competed over who got to eat them. By morning, resolve had hardened her fear. She had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. She took a deep breath and dialed the number on the card. A crisp, professional voice answered immediately. When she gave her name, she was put through to Mr. Nakamura without a moment's hesitation. "Miss Diallo." His voice was as calm and measured as it had been in the restaurant. "I am glad you called. I have taken the liberty of securing a conference room at my hotel. Can you meet me in 1 hour?" An hour later, Amara found herself not in a sterile conference room, but in a sprawling penthouse suite at the Mandarin Oriental, overlooking Central Park. Mr. Nakamura was there, along with a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, whom he introduced as Yuki Saito, the head of his legal department. There were no pretenses. Amara spent the next 2 hours recounting her entire story, starting from her promising career in Paris, her work on the Rousseau defense, the sudden data leak, the doctored reports that pointed directly at her, and the swift, brutal way her firm and the industry had cast her out. She explained how she had fled to New York, taking on menial work to stay under the radar. A shamed and defeated an immigrant, starting over with nothing. Mr. Nakamura and Miss Saito listened without interruption, their expressions serious. When she was finished, Miss Saito spoke first. "What you describe, Miss Diallo," she said, her English perfect, "is a classic smear and acquire tactic. Discredit the defense from within, create chaos, and then swoop in to pick up the pieces at a discount. Meridian Holdings was the legal instrument, but Wellington was the mind behind it. To prove it, we need more than your testimony. We need the original, untampered data." "It's gone," Amara said, the old hopelessness creeping back. "It was on a secure server at the bank. After I was fired, my access was revoked, and my files were archived, which means they were probably wiped." "Perhaps," Mr. Nakamura said, leaning forward, "but men like Wellington are arrogant. Arrogance leads to carelessness. They may believe the evidence is destroyed, but digital ghosts are hard to exorcise completely. This is where we may be of assistance." He explained his interest was not purely altruistic. Wellington Equity's predatory tactics were a cancer in the global market. Nakamura Heavy Industries believed in building and sustaining, not tearing down and selling for parts. Wellington's attempt to recruit him into Project Titan was an insult to his business philosophy. Helping Amara was a matter of honor, but it was also a strategic move to eliminate a dishonorable competitor. "We have resources, Miss Diallo," Mr. Nakamura stated plainly. "Technological, legal, and financial. We can fund an investigation. We can hire the best forensic data recovery specialists, but we need your expertise. You know where to look. You know the names, the file structures, the protocols from your time at the bank." Just as this new, unbelievable alliance was being forged, Amara's phone rang. It was an unknown number with a French country code. Her blood ran cold. She hesitated, then answered, putting it on speaker. "Amara Diallo, is that you?" The voice was old, crackling, and instantly familiar. It was Professor Claude Moreau, her former mentor from her university days at the Sorbonne. A man who taught corporate ethics and was one of the few people who had believed in her innocence. "Professor Moreau," she whispered, stunned. "My child, I have been trying to reach you for a year," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "I saw an article this morning, a small mention in the online financial bulletin. A partnership between Wellington Equity and Nakamura. Heavy Industries has been abruptly canceled after a dramatic dinner incident in New York. It mentioned Wellington by name. I had a terrible feeling it had something to do with you." "Professor, how?" "It doesn't matter," he interrupted. "Listen to me. After you were disgraced, I never believed it. I started my own quiet inquiries. I have a former student, a good man, who now works in the IT security department at Banque Commerciale Internationale. He always felt your case was handled improperly. We spoke last night. Your files were not wiped, Amara. They were placed in a deep archive, a segregated server used for litigation holds. They couldn't wipe them without creating a suspicious data gap. They are dormant, but they exist. Amara stared at the phone, her mind reeling. The one piece of evidence she thought was lost forever. The digital ghost Mr. Nakamura had just spoken of was real. There is more, Professor Moreau continued, his voice low. The man who replaced you, the one who benefited most from your dismissal, was a senior analyst named Laurent Beaumont. Beaumont left the bank 6 months after you did. He now holds a very comfortable, very senior position at the European headquarters of Wellington Equity. The final piece clicked into place. It was an inside job. Beaumont had likely been Wellington's mole all along. He had stolen and altered her data, framed her, and been rewarded for his treason. Amara looked from her phone to Mr. Nakamura and Miss Sato. Their expressions were grim, determined. The hunt was no longer just for a ghost. They now had a name, a location, and a target. A transatlantic alliance had just been forged, combining Amara's intimate knowledge, Nakamura's immense resources, and Moreau's crucial intelligence from the heart of the old empire. The war against Marcus Wellington was about to go global. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in controlled, relentless pressure. The penthouse suite at the Mandarin Oriental, with its panoramic views of Central Park, was transformed from a symbol of luxury into a high-tech transatlantic war room. Whiteboards covered in timelines and names replaced expensive art on the walls. The quiet hum of servers and encrypted communication lines replaced the gentle classical music of the hotel. This was Amara's new office, and she had never felt more at home. She found herself at the center of a formidable team. There was Yuki Sato, Nakamura's head of legal, a woman whose calm demeanor masked a mind like a steel trap. She moved with quiet purpose, her calls to legal teams in New York and Paris surgically precise. Then there was Takeshi, the forensic tech analyst, a young man who seemed to subsist entirely on coffee and instant noodles, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards in a blur. He spoke rarely, but when he did, it was to announce a breakthrough. Amara, for her part, was the heart of the operation. She was the institutional memory, the one who knew the names, the corporate culture of the bank, the protocols, and most importantly, the psychological makeup of the people who had wronged her. The weariness in her eyes was replaced by a sharp analytical fire. Their first target was not Marcus Wellington, but the man who had been his instrument, Laurent Beaumont. Men like Beaumont are driven by 2 things, greed and ego, Amara explained to the team, pointing to his photo on the whiteboard. He betrayed his firm for money, but he took my job for status. He'll believe his position at Wellington Equity makes him untouchable. That's his weakness. Miss Sato's investigators in Europe began painting a vivid picture of Beaumont's life. He wasn't just living well, he was living recklessly. They tracked his lavish spending through public records and discreet sources. A new Porsche, a weekend apartment in Geneva, an online footprint that showed a taste for high-stakes online poker. He's leaking money, Ms. Sato observed during one late-night briefing, pointing to a financial summary. His salary is substantial, but his expenditures are astronomical. He's supplementing his income. Takeshi found the source. He's making small, frequent trades in tech and pharmaceutical stocks, he announced, pulling up a color-coded chart. They're timed perfectly, always a day or two before major announcements by companies. Wellington Equity has an interest in. It's classic insider trading. He's gotten sloppy, arrogant. While the investigators built their case against Beaumont, Ms. Sato launched the legal assault on Banque Commerciale Internationale. The initial response was a wall of corporate resistance. The bank's lawyers were dismissive, citing privacy laws and statutes of limitations. Ms. Sato was unfazed. In a tense video conference with the bank's general counsel in Paris, she laid out her position with chilling clarity. "Monsieur Lefebvre," she began, her voice deceptively pleasant, "we are not on a fishing expedition. We have credible intelligence indicating that a former employee, Amara Diallo, was the victim of corporate espionage originating from within your institution. leading to significant financial and reputational damage. We also have reason to believe the evidence of this crime is stored on a specific litigation hold server, serial number 7 Alpha Delta. Refusing a legitimate, targeted discovery request will force us to file a motion compelling your cooperation. The optics of a major bank actively hiding evidence of a crime to protect a saboteur would be unfortunate, especially when our client, Nakamura Industries, is considering its future European banking partners. The veiled threat, combining legal force with immense financial pressure, worked. Within 48 hours, a massive encrypted data file was securely transferred to Takeshi's servers. The next 72 hours were a tense waiting game. Takeshi worked around the clock, his corner of the suite littered with empty coffee cups. Amara found she couldn't sleep. She paced the suite, the ghosts of her past swirling around her. What if they found nothing? What if the data had been corrupted beyond recovery? On the third night, just as dawn was breaking over the city, Takeshi called her over. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his eyes were bright. "I found it," he whispered, pointing to his central monitor. "It's beautiful." On the screen were 2 documents side by side. The first was titled a D_Rousseau_VF in al.xls, her file, her work. The second was LB_Rousseau_VF_final_revised, created 97 minutes after hers. "I've run a differential analysis," Takeshi said, typing a command. The screen lit up with highlighted text. In Beaumont's version, revenue projections were lowered by 12%. Operating cost estimates were inflated by 18%. The debt-to-equity ratios were subtly skewed. They were small changes individually plausible, but together they painted a picture of Amara's strategy as reckless and doomed to fail. It was the work of a skilled liar. "And now for the magic," Takeshi said. He brought up another window, the server access log. It showed Amara uploading her file at 4:15 p.m. Paris time. It then showed an access and download of that same file at 4:30 p.m. from an IP address assigned to Laurent Beaumont's terminal. Finally, it showed the upload of his revised, sabotaged version at 5:52 p.m. And then the final, damning piece of evidence, a log of an encrypted data packet sent from Beaumont's terminal at 6:10 p.m. to an offshore server in the Cayman Islands. A server Ms. Seto's team had already definitively linked to Meridian Holdings, Marcus Wellington's shell corporation. Amara stared at the screen, her breath catching in her chest. It was all there. The entire crime laid bare in lines of code and timestamps. It was the truth, pristine and undeniable. She felt a tear slide down her cheek, not of sadness, but of profound, earth-shattering vindication. The final act was swift. Miss Saito and a French lawyer flew to Geneva. They didn't storm Beaumont's office. They invited him for a coffee at a discreet 5-star hotel. He arrived looking smug and slightly annoyed. He barely had time to order an espresso before Miss Saito slid a tablet across the table. On it was the evidence of his insider trading. "We believe this constitutes a significant breach of your employment contract with Wellington Equity, not to mention a violation of several Swiss and EU financial regulations," she said calmly. Beaumont paled, sputtering denials. Miss Saito let him finish, then slid a second tablet across the table. This one displayed the server logs from the bank. His smugness evaporated, replaced by raw animal panic. "My client, Amara Diallo, has no interest in seeing you in prison, Monsieur Beaumont," Miss Saito said, her voice like ice. "She wants the man who gave the orders. You have one chance to give us a full signed confession detailing Marcus Wellington's role in the entire affair. In return, we will provide this evidence of your unrelated financial activities to the authorities, who will likely be far more lenient on a cooperative witness than on a common criminal." Cornered and exposed, Laurent Beaumont broke completely. He confessed to everything. With Beaumont's signed confession, the dossier was complete. They didn't go to the authorities first. That path was slow, prone to backroom deals. Mr. Nakamura wanted a public execution. He personally contacted the editors of 3 of the world's most respected financial newspapers, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and Le Monde. The entire package was delivered to them simultaneously, with an embargo of 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time the next day. Amara was awake, watching the sunrise from the penthouse window when the first alerts hit her phone. The headlines were brutal. Wellington's deceit, leaked files, reveal years of corporate espionage. The Rousseau affair, Wellington equity, framed an analyst to seize a French gem. The fall of a titan, how one immigrant waitress brought down a private equity king. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Trading on stocks linked to Wellington equity was halted. The SEC, BaFin, and the Swiss authorities announced coordinated, wide-ranging investigations. Wellington's investors, the powerful men and women he had made rich, turned on him with the ferocity of a shark pack. The emergency board meeting was not a negotiation. It was an amputation. They severed every tie, clawed back every bonus they legally could, and threw him out to face the consequences alone. He was a pariah. Amara watched an interview with a visibly shaken board member on TV. "We had no idea," the man lied. Marcus Wellington acted alone. "His actions are a betrayal of everything we stand for." A week later, a formal settlement offer arrived from Banque Commerciale Internationale. It was a 9-figure sum number so large it seemed unreal. It was hush money, an apology, and restitution all rolled into one. Looking at it, Amara felt a strange detachment. The money was validation, but it couldn't buy back the lost years, the shame, the struggle, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep in her tiny Queens apartment, wondering if she'd ever recover. Her future was an open, intimidating expanse. She had her name back, her reputation not just restored, but enhanced. Job offers flooded in from investment banks and private equity firms, all eager to hire the woman who had outplayed Marcus Wellington. But the idea of returning to that life, of poring over spreadsheets to make the rich richer, felt like a betrayal of her own journey. She thought of the other immigrants who worked alongside her at Celesta, the ones who hadn't had her education or connections, who were still trapped in cycles of exploitation. She met Mr. Nakamura one last time in the now dismantled war room. "You have a choice, Miss Diallo," he said. "You can return to the game, a more powerful player than before, or you can help change the rules." He laid out his vision. The Phoenix Institute, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to corporate ethics and accountability. It would be funded by a coalition of companies led by Nakamura Industries, who believed that long-term value came from integrity, not predation. It would investigate corporate malfeasance, provide legal aid to whistleblowers, and advocate for stronger regulations, especially protections for immigrant workers who were too often exploited by systems that assumed they had no voice. "I need someone to lead its European operations," Mr. Nakamura said. "Someone with the skills of an analyst, the heart of a survivor, and the courage of a fighter. Someone who understands exactly what we are up against, and someone who knows what it's like to be invisible." Amara looked out the window at the vast city below. She had come here to disappear. She had been a ghost, a whisper, an immigrant in a uniform, serving a society that looked right through her. Now she was being offered a sword. She would not be analyzing companies to acquire them. She would be analyzing them to hold them accountable. She would be the guardian she never had for herself, and for all the others who worked in the shadows, their brilliance dismissed, their humanity ignored. A slow smile spread across her face, the first genuine, joyful smile in years. "Mr. Nakamura," she said, her voice clear and strong, "when do I start?" That's the incredible story of Amara Diallo, a woman who reminds us that strength and intelligence are not defined by a job title, a uniform, or an immigration status. It's a powerful testament to the fact that you never truly know the battles the person standing next to you has fought or the hidden power they hold within. Amara's story is about more than just revenge. It's about resilience, the reclamation of one's identity, and the surprising alliances that can form in the fight for justice. It shows that even in a world that seems to be dominated by the loud and the arrogant, a quiet, steady voice speaking the truth can bring down an empire, and that sometimes the people society renders invisible are the ones with the clearest vision of all. If you were inspired by Amara's courage and her fight for what is right, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And for more true life stories of incredible twists of fate and triumphant underdogs, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Thank you for listening.